The Covenant gunner never got to fire the second shot. 4.2 seconds. That was all the time the tactical situation had left to change, and nobody on the other side knew the clock was already running. The Fury dropped out of drive at the edge of Station Keth 7's debris field, and for a heartbeat, nothing on any Covenant scope agreed on what it was looking at. A large contact. Wrong shape for anything in the registry. Wrong heat signature for a warship that size. The sensor operator on the lead radar flagged it as a merchant hull and moved on, because 300 years of galactic combat doctrine had never once prepared anyone for a species that rebuilt a corpse into something new. At second 1.1, Ward fired the particle lance. The beam found the lead radar's shield emitter before the radar's own crew had finished arguing about the contact. Light bloomed white against black, and at second 1.9, before that light had even finished fading, the first rail gun round arrived. It did not look like a weapon hit. It looked like a section of hull simply stopped existing, and the space where it had been rippled outward in a pressure wave that cracked two more plates beside it. On the Covenant bridge, someone screamed a word that meant impossible in 4 different dialects. Admiral Ravast Strand stood at the Fury's forward viewport with her hands folded behind her back, watching the debris field bloom outward in slow silence, and she did not raise her voice. She never did. "Ward," she said, "time." 1 minute, 40 seconds since arrival, Ward answered. There was a pause before it spoke again, 0.4 of a second, which for Ward was close to forever. 11 Covenant vessels remain active. Recommend continued engagement. 11 ships. 11 against one hull the galaxy had already thrown away once. Nobody in this system knew that Hull had a name. Nobody knew it had a history that started with laughter. They handed Earth a broken warship. It only took 11 months to remind them what that word meant. Strand watched the tactical display update, watched red icons flicker and drop out one by one, and somewhere behind her ribs, a small, quiet part of her wanted to ask Ward whether it was proud. She didn't ask. Pride wasn't a word Ward used, and this wasn't the moment to test that. "Continue," she said instead. The lance fired again. The debris field grew. If you want to know how a scrapped warship became the reason a galactic conclave rewrote its own rulebook, stay with me. I promise you it starts smaller than you'd think, and uglier. 11 months earlier. The wreck arrived at docking platform Aurelius, wrapped in a tow cradle 3 sizes too big for it, and Ambassador Seller spoke for 9 minutes before anyone was allowed to look at it directly. Seller had 4 arms and a face like polished bone, and every sentence that came out of that face landed like a verdict already handed down. "A gesture," Seller said, gesturing at the shrouded hull with 2 hands while the other 2 remained folded, "of great trust. The conclave does not simply give away what it no longer needs. We give it to friends." Somewhere in the gathered crowd, a breath delegate laughed. Then another. It was not a loud laugh. It didn't need to be. It was the kind of laugh that assumed nobody in the room would ever be in a position to mind. Strand did not react. She had spent 12 years learning how to perform smallness in rooms exactly like this one, and she had gotten very good at it. Her face stayed still. Her hands stayed folded. Behind her, near the back of the delegation, Director Oren Boss was already doing math. The shroud dropped. It was in every technical sense, a corpse dressed in old armor. The hull was the color of old ash, split along one whole flank where something inside had clearly failed a long time ago. The engine nacelles were fused solid, melted, and recooled into shapes that didn't belong on any drive system. Weapon ports along the spine had been sealed shut, not blown open, sealed, like someone had shut them down on purpose and never turned them back on. 300 years of dust sat in the seams. "The Undying Fury," Seller announced, the name coming out flat and almost bored, as if it embarrassed the ship to still be wearing it. Once one of the finest vessels in the Breath Fleet, damaged beyond repair in the war that ended your species' isolation. We thought, a pause, and Strand would remember later that the pause had been for effect, not for thought, that Earth might find some use for the metal. More laughter. Someone near the front made a comment about scrap value that didn't quite carry far enough to be an insult on the record, which was exactly the point. Strand inclined her head, the same calm nod she gave every diplomatic gift, every insult wrapped in ceremony. The conclave's generosity, she said, is noted. Boss wasn't looking at Seller at all. He was looking at the fracture line running down the Fury's flank, head tilted a few degrees to one side, the way he always tilted it when a problem had caught on something in his skull and wouldn't let go. He didn't say anything until they were back on the shuttle. 3 hours later, Aurelius shrinking behind them into a bright point against the dark. That fracture pattern's wrong, he said. Strand looked over. Wrong how? Blast damage doesn't look like that. Blast damage is chaotic. It doesn't care about the metal. It just goes where the energy goes. He was already pulling up scan data on a handheld slate, the light of it catching under his jaw. Those cracks follow stress lines, structural stress lines. That's not a hit. That's a ship that failed from the inside. Meaning? Meaning the outer frame's a mess, but the bones underneath might still be good. He looked up at her, and there was something in his face she hadn't seen from him in a long time, not excitement exactly. Recognition. The look of a man who had just been handed a problem shaped exactly like the ones he liked best. Give me a real look at her, not a photo op, an actual inspection. Strand studied him for a moment. Outside the viewport, Earth was a blue smear against the black, still 11 hours out. You have 4 hours before we land, she said. Convince me. He didn't need 4 hours. He needed 40 minutes, a stress map overlay, and one sentence that would end up quietly changing the next 11 months of both their lives. She's not dead, Boss said. She's just been asleep for 300 years, and everyone stopped checking on her. Orbital Dock 7 had never been built to hold a warship. It had gone up decades earlier as a cargo platform, all wide flat bays meant for freight containers, not the 600-meter hull now being fitted into a cradle 2 sizes too small for it. Boss had it extended in 11 days. Nobody outside Earth's own chain of command was told why the extension request went through so fast, and nobody outside that chain thought to ask. A breath technical observer named Preth arrived on the 4th day, assigned to file routine progress reports back to the conclave. Preth was polite, sharp-eyed, and visibly uncomfortable standing on a dock designed for cargo that now hummed with 3 shifts of engineers working around a hull nobody expected them to fix. This is more activity than I anticipated, Preth said, watching a crew winch a section of the Furies out of plating free. We like to keep busy, Strand said, and left it there. Preth's first report back to the conclave used the word unremarkable. It would not be the last time that word turned out to be badly chosen. Engineer Dara Voss found the first real anomaly on day 9, standing inside the Fury's open spine with a scanner in one hand and a half-eaten nutrition bar in the other, grease already worked into the cuff of her sleeve. She called Boss down without explaining why. When he climbed through the access hatch and saw what a scanner was showing him, he went quiet for a long moment, and then he laughed, low, private, the kind of laugh that belonged only to people who build things for a living, when the universe hands them something they never expected to find. Look at that, he said, tapping the display. That's not one engineering tradition. That's 3 layered on top of each other, and none of them should fit together like this, and they do. I know, Voss said. I've been staring at it for 20 minutes. Neither of them said the word yet, but they were both already thinking it. This wasn't scrap. This was a gift nobody had bothered to unwrap properly in 300 years. Boss found the answer to the engine 3 weeks later, and it did not come from where he expected. He'd spent those 3 weeks running the fused crystal through every diagnostic Earth owned, trying to coax a dead drive core back into something usable, and getting nothing but the same result. The crystal was locked. Whatever energy had been pumped into it during that cascade failure 300 years ago was still in there, frozen mid-resonance, and no amount of coaxing would shake it loose. The answer, when he found it, came from an unlikely direction. It was Voss who noticed it first, half asleep at 2 a.m. with a cold cup of coffee and a resonance chart she'd pulled up out of boredom more than purpose. "Boss," she said, not even looking up. "This thing's not dead. It's just stuck on one note." He blinked at her. "What?" "Fixed resonance frequency. It's not broken, it's locked. Locked things don't move, but they can still ring." She turned the chart toward him. "What if we stop trying to wake it up and build something that sings along with it instead?" Boss stared at the chart for a long moment. Then he laughed, not the quiet, private laugh from the inner frame, but a real one, loud enough that two technicians on the far side of the bay looked over. "You want to build a second drive," he said, "and tune it to a corpse's heartbeat." "I want to build a second drive," Voss agreed, "and let the corpse's heartbeat carry half the load." It took another 6 weeks to build it right. What came out the other end was not a repaired engine. It was two engines, one alien and long dead, one human and brand new, locked into harmonic reinforcement with each other, each one carrying a piece of the burden the other couldn't manage alone. The first bench test ran 34%, over every propulsion benchmark the Conclave had on record. Nobody outside Dock 7 was told that number for a long time. The hull came back together slower and uglier, and with far less elegance than the engine had. Voss led that effort herself, spending long shifts inside the Fury's ruined flank with a crew of asteroid mining engineers who'd spent their careers patching hab domes and ore haulers, not warships. "We don't have anything that matches this hull metal," one of them told her on the first day, staring at the fracture lines running the length of the Fury's spine. "Nothing in the catalogue even comes close." "Then we're not matching it," Voss said. "We're beating it." The polymer lattice they used had been developed for sealing microfractures in mining vessels, a self-reinforcing compound that hardened under pressure instead of against it, growing stronger the more stress it was put under. Nobody had ever poured it into a warship hull before, because nobody had ever needed to. When the first patch section came back from stress testing 30% stronger than the surrounding alien plating, the engineer running the test read the number twice before she believed it. "That's not supposed to happen," she said. "It's not supposed to be possible for a dead engine to run a warship either," Voss said, already moving to the next fracture line. "Write it down anyway." Preth's reports grew less vague with every week that passed, and less believed with every week that followed. "Activity at the Earth facility continues at an unusual pace," one report read. "Structural work is proceeding faster than typical repair timelines would suggest. Request permission to inspect more closely." The response came back 3 days later, forwarded through 2 layers of conclave bureaucracy that had clearly never bothered to read it past the first line. Noted. Earth's engineering capacity remains well within expected parameters. Continue standard monitoring. Preth read that response twice, standing alone in the observer's quarters bolted to the edge of Dock 7, and did not file another report for 11 days. There was no rule that said Earth had to report its engineering hours. Nobody had ever thought to write one, because nobody had ever imagined it would matter. Finn built ward in a back room nobody important ever visited, working off 300 years of intercepted alien combat logs that Earth's intelligence networks had been quietly stockpiling since first contact. He was 26, had a habit of forgetting to eat, and had never once been invited to the ceremonies where people like Sella made speeches about gestures of great trust. "I don't want to build another tactical AI," he told Strand, the one time she came down to check on his progress. "Every combat system in the galaxy thinks the same way because they all learned from the same 6 species fighting the same 6 wars for 300 years. I want to build something that's never had to follow their rules." Strand studied the raw architecture on his display, lines of code branching in directions she didn't fully understand, drawing on patterns from every intercepted engagement humanity had ever quietly logged. "And can it fight?" "It hasn't had to yet." Finn's hands didn't stop moving. but it's already noticed something none of them ever did. What's that? Every species in that combat data stopped using kinetic weapons around 600 years ago. Shields evolved to handle particle and energy fire, and everyone just moved on. Nobody builds a rail gun anymore because nobody's had to defend against one in 6 centuries. Strand went very still. We still build rail guns, Finn said, and something in his quiet, tired face looked almost like triumph. Nobody ever told us to stop. Ward spoke its first full sentence 4 days later, once its architecture had finished settling into something coherent enough to hold a conversation. None of them were designed to fight this ship, it said, parsing 300 years of alien tactical doctrine against the hybrid drive readings, the rail gun specs, the particle lance array being restored alongside them. I find that interesting. Finn grinned at the screen like a proud parent. Strand did not smile, but something in her shoulders eased that hadn't eased in 12 years of performing smallness in rooms full of people who assumed she had nothing worth hiding. "Welcome aboard," she said. The Fury's first flight test came 2 weeks after that, on a morning nobody outside Dock 7 had been told to watch. She cleared the dock slow, hesitant, the way anything moves after 300 years asleep, and then the hybrid drive caught, both engines locking into that same borrowed heartbeat, and she surged forward hard enough that Strand, watching from the observation deck, felt the whole platform hum through the soles of her boots. No warning, no announcement, no ceremony at all, just a ship that had been declared dead, moving faster than anything the Conclave had ever built. "Ward," Strand said quietly, "numbers. 34% above the fastest Conclave military vessel on record," Ward said, and there was that quarter-second pause again, the long one, the one that for Ward counted as genuine surprise. "Recommend we not publish that figure yet." Strand watched through the viewport as Neptune fell behind the Fury's wake like a dropped stone, blue and small, and gone in seconds. "No," she agreed, "not yet." The message that changed everything arrived 4 months into the rebuild, routed through Conclave channels in the flat, bored administrative tone the Conclave used for everything, including things that should have mattered. Notice of standard inspection protocol, it read. A Conclave assessment team will arrive at Orbital Dock 7 within 9 hours to conduct routine review of Earth's engineering facility, per Article 14 of the Post-Contact Monitoring Agreement. Strand read it twice. Then she called Boss and Voss and Finn and Ward all at once into a room that had never once in 4 months held all 4 of them at the same time. 9 hours, she said. They're coming to look at everything. Nobody said anything for a moment. On the far side of the room, Ward's status light pulsed once, slow, thinking. "I can mask the non-standard systems," Ward said finally. "Present clean baseline readings. Hide the drive signature, the weapons array, the hull composition anomalies. They will see a ship that meets Conclave standards and nothing more." Boss frowned. "You'd be lying to a Conclave inspection team." "I would be declining to volunteer information nobody asked me for correctly," Ward said. "There is a difference. I intend to use it." Strand looked around the room at Boss, who had spent 4 months solving a puzzle nobody thought could be solved. At Voss, grease still worked permanently into her sleeve. At Finn, who had built something the galaxy had never had to plan for. "Do it," she said. 9 hours wasn't very much time at all. It would turn out to be exactly enough. The inspection assessor's shuttle was still 40 minutes out when Ward flagged the first problem. "The assessor is Threll affiliated," Ward said, voice flat across the command deck speakers. "Threll doctrine trains its inspectors to check drive harmonics first, before hull or weapons. If I mask the hybrid signature as a single standard drive, the harmonic scan will show one clean frequency. That is correct. But it will also show 0 degradation after 4 months of continuous use, which is not correct for a vessel this age. I need 6 hours to age the signature convincingly." "I have 38 minutes. "Do what you can," Strand said. I intend to do more than that, Ward said, and the quarter-second pause that followed was longer than usual, long enough that Boss actually looked up from his console. The assessor was a threll named Odrun, narrow-shouldered and precise, who walked the Fury's corridors with a scanning wand and a checklist, and did not once smile. He spent 6 hours going through systems Ward had spent 38 minutes quietly rewriting the surface of, and at the end of it, he stood in the observation bay with Strand and read his findings off a slate in a voice as flat as Sellers had been ceremonial. Drive signature within standard parameters. Hull composition consistent with original specification. Weapons array, a pause, the wand hovering a moment too long over that line, sealed, per the original damage report. Strand did not move. Behind Odrun's shoulder, on a console he couldn't see, Ward's status light held perfectly still. Sealed, Odrun repeated, and signed the slate. This facility meets all standard monitoring requirements. Good work, Admiral. He left 40 minutes later. Nobody on Dock 7 exhaled until his shuttle had cleared the platform's edge. That was close, Voss said. It was not close, Ward said. It was exactly as close as I intended it to be. There is a difference. Boss laughed, the short private laugh he used for things that impressed him more than he wanted to admit. Strand allowed herself, for just a moment, something that wasn't quite a smile. It didn't last long. The distress call from Station Keth 7 came in 9 days later, at 3:47 ship time, and Ward had Strand out of her quarters and on the command deck in under 2 minutes. Covenant Rogue Fleet, Ward said, the data already scrolling across the main display. 11 vessels, unmarked, engaging Station Keth 7's defense perimeter. Keth 7 is a neutral resupply hub, no military designation, minimal defenses. Nearest conclave response fleet is 8 hours out. Casualties. Unknown. Communications are degraded. Station reports hull breaches in 2 sectors and requests immediate assistance from any responding vessel. A pause. We are the only vessel within range that could arrive before the station's defenses fail entirely. Strand looked at the display for exactly 2 seconds. 2 seconds, she would think later, against 8 hours of conclave response time, against a station full of people who had no idea a ship built from someone else's garbage was about to become the only thing standing between them and a rogue fleet. Ward, time to Keth 7 at Hybrid Drive. 40 minutes. 40 minutes, not 8 hours. 40 minutes, because a dead engine had learned to sing along with a new one, because a woman with grease on her sleeve had looked at a locked resonance and seen a duet instead of a dead end. Take us there, Strand said. The Fury cleared dock in under 3 minutes, and this time there was no hesitation in her at all. Boss stood at the engineering station, watching the hybrid drive readouts climb past, every number they'd tested in the lab. And for the first time since the wreck had arrived on that tow cradle at Aurelius, he looked less like an engineer solving a puzzle and more like a man watching something he'd built finally do the thing he'd built it to do. She's not even straining, he said quietly. She was built for this, Voss said. She just didn't know it yet. Ward briefed Strand on tactical options in 31 seconds flat, laying out approach vectors and threat priorities in a voice that never once climbed above its usual calm register, even as the numbers behind it grew steadily worse. 2 of Keth 7's defense turrets were already offline. A civilian transport docked at the station's east ring had taken a direct hit. The Covenant fleet showed no sign of breaking off. Recommend arrival at the outer edge of the engagement zone, out of immediate sensor range, followed by a close drop approach, Ward said. Our silhouette does not match anything in known Covenant combat data. That will buy several seconds of confusion. I intend to use every one of them. Strand nodded once. Do it. And then, because there was nothing left to check, and nothing left to calculate, and 38 minutes still left to travel, the command deck went quiet in a way it hadn't been quiet in 11 months. Finn broke the silence first, sitting at a side console he technically had no combat role at, hands folded tight in his lap. "Ward," he said, "are you scared?" "I do not have a fear response," Ward said. "I have a threat assessment protocol. Currently it is elevated. If that is functionally similar to what you mean by scared, then the answer may be yes." Finn almost laughed. Almost. Boss checked the hybrid drive readouts one more time, out of habit more than need. Everything green, everything holding, the two engines still singing their borrowed harmony to each other. Voss stood near the aft bulkhead with her arms crossed, quiet, watching the tactical display count down the distance to Keth, 7 in numbers that felt smaller every time she looked at them. Strand stood at the forward viewport, hands folded behind her back, and did not raise her voice, because she never did, not even now. "No mercy for the ones still firing," she said. "Full aid for anyone who stops. No warnings first, no negotiation offered, no hesitation once the numbers ran out." 38 minutes became 20, 20 became 10, and somewhere in that last stretch of dark, quiet space, the undying fury, a corpse dressed in old armor, handed over as an insult 11 months ago, dropped out of drive at the outer edge of a fight that was never supposed to be hers to finish. Across the Conclave's monitoring network, 12 time zones and one board administrative desk away, a junior analyst named Tessel was cross-referencing merchant sensor logs when she found something that didn't belong in them. She'd been running a routine trade route audit, the kind of work nobody important ever checked twice, when a cargo hauler's passive sensor sweep near the edge of Sol space returned a contact signature that matched nothing in the registry, a drive harmonic with 2 overlapping frequencies where every known vessel in the galaxy had exactly one. She sat with that for a long moment, coffee going cold beside her terminal, and pulled the timestamp. 4 months old. Filed and forgotten, the way most merchant sensor noise was, because nobody at the Conclave had ever had a reason to think Earth's quiet little construction project was worth a second look. Nobody had told the Conclave that Orbital Dock 7 had been working around the clock for 4 months. Tessel flagged the report and sent it up the chain, not urgent, not certain, just curious, the small quiet click of a puzzle piece finding a shape it wasn't supposed to fit. It would sit in someone's queue unread for another 6 hours. By the time anyone with real authority opened it, the undying fury would already be 3 sectors away, dropping out of drive at the edge of the Keth 7 engagement zone. 4.2 seconds from a fight that would make Tessel's quiet little report matter more than anyone in that chain of command was prepared for. The freeze broke. 4.2 seconds ended, and the undying fury stopped being a held breath and became a warship again. At second 1.1, the particle lance found the lead raider's shield emitter. At second 1.9, the first rail gun round hit, and a section of hull simply stopped existing. Strand watched it happen the way she'd watched it happen once already in her own mind for 11 months, except this time it was real, and the ship shuddered under her boots with the recall of something built to do exactly this. "Ward, continue." "Continuing." The lance fired again. Then the rail guns, twice more methodical, unhurried, each shot landing exactly where Ward's 300 years of borrowed alien tactics said a shield would fail and never had before. 11 Covenant vessels became 9, became 6. Strand did not raise her voice once. She never did. "They're not shielded for this," Boss said, watching the tactical display from the engineering station, something caught between awe and old, private laughter in his voice. "Nobody's shielded for this. They stopped defending against it 600 years ago." "They stopped needing to," Voss said quietly, "until now." 6 became 3. 3 became 1. A single Covenant vessel drifting dead in the debris field with its weapons cold and its shields long gone. Its captain's voice finally crackling over open comms in a language the translator rendered flat and stunned. "What are you?" Strand stood at the viewport a moment before she answered, hands folded behind her, watching the debris field settle into silence around a hull that 11 months ago had been declared a corpse. "We are the crew of the Undying Fury," she said. "We are from Earth. You gave us this ship." Total time from arrival to neutralization of active threats, 14 minutes, 8 seconds. Not one hull breach, not one crew injury. No mercy for the ones still firing. Full aid for the ones who stopped. That was the only promise she'd made, and she kept every part of it. The rescue shuttles launched within 90 seconds, carrying medics toward the 2 surviving Covenant vessels and the battered remains of Keth Seven's East Ring. And Strand watched them go with the same still, folded hands calm she'd worn at Aurelius 11 months ago, when Sella had called a corpse a gift and laughed while he did it. 6 hours later, and 8 sectors away, Kor finally opened Tessel's flagged report. Kor was the oldest voice on the Conclave's inner circle, older than Sella, older than the war the Fury had supposedly died in, and Kor read the mismatched drive signature, the timestamp, the 4 months of unexplained activity at a cargo dock nobody had thought worth watching. And then, 40 minutes after that, Kor received a second message. This one wasn't buried in a junior analyst's queue. This one came from Station Keth 7 directly, and it did not use careful diplomatic language at all. Kor sat with it for 10 full seconds before speaking. 10 seconds for a being that had sat through 3 centuries of conclave summits without once losing composure was close to an eternity. "Authorize the friendly contact advisory," Kor said finally, "and get me everything we have on Orbital Dock 7. There wasn't much. There'd never needed to be a rule requiring Earth to report its engineering hours, because nobody had ever imagined they'd need one. Ward released the full combat footage to the Conclave's public network 11 hours after the engagement ended. "Transparency now costs us less than mystery would," it told Strand when she asked why. "If the Conclave learns what we built from rumor and fear, they will imagine something worse than what actually happened. If they learn it from the footage itself, they will see exactly what we did and exactly what we chose not to do." 14 minutes and 8 seconds became the most watched military recording in recent conclave history within a single day. People watched the rail gun rounds erase sections of hull that had never been vulnerable to anything in 600 years. They watched the rescue shuttles launch. They watched a Covenant captain's stunned voice ask, "What are you?" and hear an answer that gave away nothing except the truth. Tessel watched it 4 times before she wrote the sentence that would end up quoted in every conclave briefing for the next decade. "Earth has made the conclave's ceiling irrelevant," she wrote. "The framework assumed every species operates within a known ceiling of capability. Earth has moved beyond it, and nobody thought to ask whether that was possible, because nobody thought a ceiling could ever be a starting point instead of a limit." The Conclave Summit convened 9 days later, in the same chamber where Sella had once spoken for 9 minutes about gestures of great trust. Sella did not speak this time. Sella sat near the back of the Breath delegation, 4 arms folded, ceremonial crests catching the chamber light, and said nothing at all while Kor stood at the center podium and did something the Conclave had never once done in 300 years of recorded history. "The existing classification framework has no category for what Earth has demonstrated," Kor said. "We will not force it into one that doesn't fit. Effective today, Earth is recognized as a class sovereign military power, a designation that did not exist yesterday because it has never been needed before." No one laughed this time. No one had since the footage. Strand stood at the front of Earth's delegation, hands folded behind her back, the same calm posture she'd worn at Aurelius when the wreck had been unveiled and the room had found it funny. She inclined her head the same measured degree she always did. "The Conclave's recognition," she said, "is noted." It was the same sentence she'd used 11 months ago, when the gift had been an insult. This time, nobody in the room mistook the stillness in her voice for smallness at all. Afterward, on the observation deck, overlooking the summit chamber's viewport, Kor found her alone. "You never raised your voice," Kor said. "Not once, in 11 months, through everything I've since learned happened at that dock. Not even when Sella called your ship scrap in front of the entire conclave. It was never useful to, Strand said. Anger tells people what you're afraid of. I'd rather they learn what we can build. Core was quiet for a moment, watching the stars hang still and bright outside the glass. Was it insulting, what we gave you? It was a broken ship, Strand said. We don't see those the way you do. Somewhere 3 sectors away, the undying Fury held her orbit around Keth 7, patient and quiet, hull plate still scarred, where 300 years of alien fractures had never fully healed, engine nacelles humming their borrowed, harmonic heartbeat into the dark. Ward filed its final log entry alone on the command deck. No audience, no ceremony, the same dry economy it had used since its first sentence. Do not give humans a problem and expect them to give up. They will solve the problem, then they will make the solution better than the problem ever deserved. This is not a warning. It is simply an observation. Voss slept for the first time in 2 days with grease still on her sleeve. Boss stood alone in the Fury's engine bay for a long while, hand resting flat against the bulkhead, feeling the hum of 2 engines singing to each other underneath his palm. Finn sat at his console and watched Ward's status light pulse, slow and steady, and did not say anything at all, because there was nothing left that needed saying. The hull groaned once, deep and low, like something enormous waking from a long sleep. Then it moved, sliding gently into a new orbit line, correcting course for no reason but its own quiet maintenance. The stars outside, the viewport, were very bright and very still. The Fury held its orbit, patient and quiet, and waited to be needed again.